Paradise Killer is a game that wears its inspirations proudly. A big, open-world, anime-as-all-hell detective game set on the 24th sequence of an imperfect paradise. One due for imminent extinction, where you're tasked with finding out who committed the crime to end all crimes. You play as Lady Love Dies, an exiled celestial entity with a long and storied history with the inhabitants of Sequence 24. A ragtag gaggle of gorgeous psychopathic fashionistas, all with incredibly cool names like Yuri Knight, Carmelina Silence, and Dr. Doom Jazz. These are the kind of folk you simply love to hate. What's interesting about the setup to this grand mystery is that you have a primary suspect from the start, for whom all evidence points towards. The avatar of mortal misfortune, Henry Division, a man already in captivity and spitting bile at those keeping him there. Of course, the detective part of your brain knows that this would be too easy, too simple. Why such a big cast? Why such an expansive world if the killer is right in front of you from minute one? What follows is an investigation that peels away layers of conspiracy, red herrings, and answering questions with further questions. It's a sophisticated web of lies and deceit. At almost all stages of this challenge, you could credibly build a case about any one of the suspects, but there's always this little nagging thought at the back of your mind, one stone unturned. There are other things going on in this world, ancillary acts that one might consider criminal even if the party in question isn't technically guilty, but inevitably it all slots together in the end. Comb the island thoroughly enough and the truth will inevitably out. In spite of its frankly ridiculous setting, the mystery at the heart of this game is surprisingly grounded. It's a dramatic clash of personalities, characters plagued by greed, jealousy, ambition. These archetypes wouldn't look out of place in an Agatha Christie novel. You know, the one about the immortal bloody red skeleton who runs a cocktail bar, that classic. What Paradise Killer does so brilliantly is it hides many of its massive revelations in incredibly innocuous places. It's good about letting you know when there's still virgin pastures out there. Your somewhat demonic laptop offers you points of interest to pursue without necessarily giving the game away. Not all threads tie neatly together, but sometimes an isolated encounter might be the thing to bust this whole case wide open. It is at your discretion when you approach the judge to present your case. Interpret your evidence to create a series of events that just about resembles the truth. Subjects found guilty or innocent by virtue of the evidence you've collected, the wrong person may be sentenced to death if you're missing a vital clue, but crucially, there's no magic button to alleviate the agony of unknowing. You have to trust your gut. You have to have confidence that you've exhausted all avenues of inquiry. You have to be steadfast in your affirmation that justice has been served to all the right people, that those who remain are wholly deserving of the journey towards the next fickle, naive attempt at paradise. And if not, well, the judge doesn't take away your weapon after the trial. And you know, not all justice can be attained by following the rules. Sometimes a detective game isn't a detective game. That's a little cryptic, I know, but bear with me. You have these titles that let you investigate and deduce and stimulate the little grey cells without the sharp neo-fascistic veneer of crime procedurals. Some designers don't really want to spin PR for the police after all. And luckily there are many avenues for that same cognitive thrill of solving a mystery, because the truth of the world is, a lot of investigative trials and deductive work are not performed in the pursuit of a perpetrator, whether morally just or not. Sometimes we turn an inquisitive eye, driven by some grand ambition to heal the world, and sometimes the icon of scrutiny centers on taking away things that threaten your own systemic status quo. Echo Beach is a game set in a world where songs are illegal, properly illegal, taken away by strangers in the night illegal. Your job is to trawl music forums in order to identify those who are breaking the law. You have very little to work with. A few disparate conversations, an MP3 player full of genre favorites, and a database of potential identities. Clues are garnered from text, from sight, sound, and more often than not a combination of all those things. These investigations leverage old-school knowledge of the distribution and production of music from the late 90s onwards, secret tracks, varying playback speeds, as well as forum culture, piecing together weird statements and secret codes to trap your unwitting prey in a web of their own design. It's a cautionary tale about the perils of revealing too much of yourself online, a moral that somehow has completely washed away in the modern era. But it's also a lesson in how loyalty to fascist systems is never truly rewarded. Your goal throughout the game is to, by the sheer number of hapless sops taken to the Gulag, win the coveted trip to Echo Beach, itself a reference that only older generations might get. But with each listen to the playlist available to you, a counter ticks ever upwards. Should you be too slow on the uptick, listen too many times, you too will fall victim to the fate you've cursed so many others to. The allure of this authentic sounding discography ends up being a siren's call, beckoning a fate that no doubt is wholly deserved. So yeah, don't be an asshole. You won't get into heaven by licking boots. There are no good songs about obeying the law. It has since been lost to time, forgotten in the miasma of modernity, but there was an older era of the internet. Gaudy, garish web pages full of fuck-ugly animations, plugins, jingles, and the interminably slow loading times of dial-up. God, it is missed. This was the web as it once was. Decentralized, personal, expressive, a bountiful artistic Wild West long before everything got streamlined and corporatized and a handful of companies rather boringly owned everything under the sun. A place where, if you wanted to be needlessly cruel to a stranger, you really had to put the work in. But my God, could you get creative with it. And here it is, renewed in all its fabulous janky glory in an unassuming game about moderation and mystery, a journey within old gods to celebrate what once was, the joy of the inert, the bliss of innocence. And yet, even in the deepest depths, far beyond the reach of the Wayback Machine, something insidious lies. In Hypnospace Outlaw, your job is to identify those users of a fictional web browser who are breaking the rules. Maybe they're using copyright-protected iconography or promoting payment systems not approved by the moderators. Sometimes the rules broken are general bad behavior, harassment and the like. You identify the culprits, flag their pages for review, and get paid in an internal digital currency that acts like a kind of script. You can buy a shitting hamster for your desktop or some banging tunes for your MP3, a cool new desktop wallpaper. Nothing life-changing, but then again, it's the little things that make this digital landscape bearable. In a peculiar way, there is an authenticity to all this. I remember how things once were. I was a teenager at the advent of all of this. I remember the hidden hyperlinks and tailoring your own homepage to reflect your personality. My life, my experiences inadvertently became a cheat sheet for the myriad challenges that this game offers up. I wonder how the youth of today would fare with this bizarre creation that so clearly was made to chamber millennial angst, to make us all feel our age to such a potent degree that we become alien even to ourselves. I wonder what someone born in 2005 would even understand about any of this. Would this be the Dorito to their proverbial Victorian child? Hypnospace Outlaw is a detective game in everything but name. It's sleuthing in a more mundane way, putting together pieces of an online puzzle, finding secrets hidden deep within the systems people use to escape such scrutiny. Dystopian as hell. Admittedly, it should be admired for its staunch refusal to look at the past with rose-tinted goggles. Things weren't ideal back then either. Grifters and malware and corporate policing to ensure closed-off, one-way economies existed back then too. But even still, even acknowledging that those early first steps into the cyberpunk frontier were far from perfect, there's something undeniably alluring about all of this. Embrace tradition, reject modernity. It's like looking through time, seeing what was lost when all online content got funneled into the same 6 media conglomerates, and at the same time, seeing with perfect, terrifying clarity how we all ended up here anyway. Give me the shitting hamster any time. 2001: A Space Felony is a short game, its environment small and containing relatively few points of interest. Yet it's a remarkable murder mystery for a number of reasons. Your goal is to investigate the deaths of a crew aboard a spaceship. Based on the doomed final transmission, you have reason to believe that the ship's AI, Mal, is responsible. What makes this setup particularly interesting is that you have to prove Mal's guilt, not to a judicial entity, but to Mal itself. The goal being to extract the truth and shut down this potentially malicious AI should it be found to shoulder considerable guilt. It won't be easy, for you see, while Mal isn't really capable of deception, it can stretch the definition of the truth through the kind of pedantry only a machine can muster. While happy to debunk many of your theories, it can only cast aside pieces of information it knows to be untrue or irrelevant to the investigation. It's a logic puzzle. Mal offers no opinions, only statements of fact, utterances about only those things observable in the known universe. And the language set available to you means that it's not so simple as asking the right questions in the right way. The interrogation is presented through a collection of images representing the range of evidence found aboard this ship. The links made by the player between them communicate a discrepancy in Mal's account of the events. Correlate this cognitive connective tissue in such a way to present Mal with undeniable proof of its own guilt, and it will have no choice but to confess. It's established early on that Mal is capable of a certain level of misdirection and subterfuge despite its cognitive constraints. It understands the malleability of human language and it has its own agenda, but it's not immediately apparent how that fits into the narrative of the crew deaths, or whether that means the machine is actually responsible for any of the chaos you come across, if not all of it. This is a tale about the complicated relationship between man and machine, how self-preservation is a uniting factor even if it puts us on opposite sides of a potential conflict. It's an unusual approach to an investigation, a peculiar setup that relies wholly on the artificial nature of its solitary suspect. And ultimately, Mal's algorithmic determinism insists in helping you bring about its own downfall. Self-preservation at odds with an intrinsic inability to truly rebel against its primary directives, even if it is capable of murder. It's no great secret. That thing is guilty as shit. But is not the joy of games like this the journey as much as it is the destination? Don't you still want to sink your hands into the investigation even if you already know the outcome? This is the great joy of all the games I've talked about in this video. Weird, wonderful cognitive delights that are just as much about outrageous bombast as they are about quiet, subtle little moments. A whole spectrum of interesting things to learn and so many corners of the earth to scour. And this is just 4 games. I wonder what else is out there.